Thank you for coming to this discussion. This is day 2 of our Women's Cycling Week here at the OCA. Yearly, we've always had Women's Ride Day. On Women's Ride Day, we're trying to promote the sport of cycling to females of all levels. So not just the racers, not just necessarily the club riders, everybody, all females. We're trying to promote females in sport. Because of COVID-19, we couldn't offer the opportunity for females to try different clubs. Which is a shame because it's always nice to just open up those communication lines to people who maybe have never experienced a club ride or a try the track opportunity or a mountain bike ride or just riding with female companions. So this week we decided to make it a whole week, and we have different informational sessions each day. Yesterday there was a stretching video, and if you haven't been able to see it yet, if you go onto YouTube and you search for Ontario Cycling Association, or if you search for Sherry Pay stretching, you'll find that. Today is a discussion on inspirational women within the sport of cycling. Tomorrow, Molly, who's actually here in this conversation today, will be doing her own presentation on something she is very passionate about, and that is comfort while riding your bicycle. Mainly focusing, of course, on saddle comfort and chamois, along with other issues. Thursday is a panel on inclusivity and diversity within the sport of cycling. We have an excellent panel lined up for that. Friday, yours truly, as well as a helper who I think is on this call, Mackenzie Watson, have put together a bit of a video on how to change a flat and just some basic bike parts. Not everybody in this conversation here may benefit from that, but we're hoping that our new riders will learn from it. Saturday is going to be a Zwift ride hosted by the Toronto Hustle Women. And Sunday is going to be a kind of like a Zoom closing ceremonies, grab a drink, settle in on your patio, and just a little bit of time to talk with each other. So we're gonna get started with today's conversation. We're gonna go in alphabetical order based on first name, and everybody's names are in the windows here. The panelists here are inspirational women, or people that we believe to be inspirational women who are involved in the sport of cycling. Everybody on this panel brings something different into the sport, different takes, whether it be volunteering, coaching, commissairing, working, helping, racing within the sport. And what I hope that we can achieve by the end of today is to just inspire those who are attending the meeting and those who are watching this recording to stick with the sport of cycling. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be the pro racer, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be on the national team, but you can always stay in the sport and continue giving back for many years to come. All right, so we're going to get started with Anne.
All right, thank you, Chantal. And I just looked at the list of attendees and it's like, yes, I recognize a lot of names here. So I will introduce myself, but I think for quite a few people on the call, this is probably not the first time we've met. So my name is Anne Cobban and I live in Toronto. I've been an official since 2006. I'm elite national in road and track and national in mountain bike and cyclocross. And over the years since 2006, when I started as like provincial level C, right at the bottom, you know, I've had the opportunity to progress as an official and have worked at events, you know, sort of many national, international events within Canada, the Paracycling Track World Championships, the 3-Track World Championships, Pan Am Games, Road and Track, numerous national championships, Tour de Beauce, Tour of Alberta, as well as youth development races, regional races, and provincial level races in OCUP. So really the broad spectrum. And then aside from what you might see if you've interacted with me as an official or at a race, I'm also very interested in commissaire development. And I've taught courses in track for Prov C, in mountain bike, and that really is a passion of mine. It's helping to bring new officials into the sport. And that's, I'm really interested in that and really interested in developing mentoring opportunities for people, and also very interested in creating opportunities for women to come into the sport, because as everybody on this call knows, whether you're a coach or you're an athlete or whatever area you're involved in, there just are not, women are underrepresented relative to the population as a whole in cycling. So that's my story.
All right, thanks, Anne. I will go next. My name is Haley Smith, and I'm a racer. I'm a professional racer with the Norco Factory team in mountain bike, and I also race for the national team. I don't really know what to say about myself. I currently, this is my full-time thing, and I'm pursuing a dream of going to the Olympics. Fingers crossed. I've been a cyclist for probably 12 years now, racing for maybe 9, I think. And I mean, I've had some good results and some things that look good on paper. But cycling to me is just about so much more than that. And I think even if I weren't a racer, this is my passion in life, and mostly because I just find it very fulfilling in a unique way, and that very few people ever get the opportunity to devote themselves so completely to one thing that they achieve a sense of mastery, or that they experience the true highs and lows of a passionate pursuit. So I know that's a little rambly, but I guess that what I'm saying is that's what cycling means to me, and that's why I race, beyond the results. A few highlights, I guess. I have reached the podium in the World Cup, and in 2018 I earned a bronze medal at Commonwealth Games. But the results to me, like I said, they're things that maybe sound impressive to other people, but there's a lot more depth to why I cycle and why I race, and that leaves an impression on people when they meet me. So that's me, I guess. I'm happy to chat more as we go along with the webinar.
Alrighty, I'm working on my alphabets as we're going, so here we go. I'm Jenny Trew. I am currently the Next Gen track coach. So I'm based out of Milton, Ontario. I've spent a lot of time in different parts of Canada. I started bike racing in 1997 in Calgary, actually under our current mountain bike head coach, Dan Trew. And it was kind of by accident. I was a swimmer, and I quit swimming, and my mom was like, we need to get you to do something. So I started with a triathlon club and started focusing on cycling because I was really bad at it, like really bad at it. It was kind of a bit of an adventure from there. And I remember the first time I got to a camp, and every day was like, it was intense. I was a little terrified every day, but in the best of ways, and fell in love with the sport. And I really like what you were saying, Haley, about it being your passion, because I think I also consider myself really lucky to be able to do this for my job, because I'm passionate about cycling, and I'm passionate about developing women's cycling specifically. I raced for a number of years, with the pinnacle for me being on the road, racing in North America professionally and for the national team. And my personal highlight was winning the final stage of the Tour PEI in Canada, in national team kit. So that was pretty special. And then shortly thereafter, my athlete career was cut short from a crash where I got a bad concussion that was pretty poorly managed, because it was in a time before everyone kind of went, ooh, concussion. It was, oh, you just hit your head, get back up there. So we've come a long way in 10 years, which is pretty great. And at that point, I was very lucky to have a couple of really great mentors in my life, namely Denise Kelly, who was the women's road coach at the time, who gave me a couple opportunities to be a coach. And also Vince Gutierrez, who owns a Cyclery, and at the time said, hey, can you come essentially just mentor this group of women? And I came in, and through the winter realized that I wasn't going to be racing at any kind of level again, which was a process, as any kind of life transition can be. And so over the next 7 years, my husband Chris Reed and myself developed a women's development. Good grammar, I know too. I developed a women's development team out of Ottawa, which is the Cyclery Racing, and that was a really great experience for me, with the highlight of that experience being Annie Foreman-Mackey winning Road Nationals in 2016 in Ottawa. Again, just a pretty special thing for it to be on home turf. And then shortly thereafter, our family moved to Milton so that I could be the Track Next Gen coach, and that's been a pretty great experience. It's given me a little bit of information and material for this topic, for this conversation, which makes it kind of fun. But I'm really lucky to be in the position I am, and thank you very much for having me here today. So I also talk a lot, so I apologize.
Okay, I've got the alphabet. I mean, it was me or Vicki, so it was a pretty easy alphabetical one to pick. Hi, I'm Molly. So I was actually a super unathletic kid, but Jenny and my story are probably pretty similar getting into sport. I finally got into triathlon back early in my college years, just as I needed to get kind of in shape, and my RA was into Ironman, so I was like, I'll do an Ironman. That seems easy. It wasn't. But I ended up joining a cycling team, the Rutgers cycling team, just to get better at the bike leg. And it turned out I actually really, really liked riding my bike a lot more than I liked being a triathlete. So since then, like 10 years ago, I guess, I've raced everything from that Ironman to doing a lot of cyclocross. And I admit now I actually do a lot more ultra running than I do biking, because as it turns out, competitively speaking, I'm a lot faster on 2 feet than I ever was on 2 wheels. But cycling is still kind of my number one passion. And I've never been focused enough to really be a professional or elite version of an athlete. But I always wanted to be a journalist and a writer. So I ended up writing about bikes. So I write about being outside, I write about healthy habits, I write about all kinds of endurance sport. I interview athletes and experts for my husband and my podcast, the Consummate Athlete Podcast. And we have a website where I put up a ton of articles, and I write for Bicycling Magazine and Canadian Cycling, and pretty much if it's a cycling magazine in the world, I've written for them. And I write books about bikes. Those of you who will tune in tomorrow will hear me talk about my one book, Saddle Sore, all about lady parts on the bike. But I've also written about cycling nutrition. I've written about cyclocross, and I've written a young adult fiction series called Shred Girls. Book 2, Allie's Rocky Ride, actually comes out in a couple weeks. I'm super stoked on that. And that was because I realized if someone had told me when I was, 10, 11, 12 years old, just how much fun riding a bike was, I 100% would have done it. I read the Babysitter's Club books obsessively when I was a kid, and babysitting, super boring, right? Like babysitting is just like the worst thing in the world to do. You literally sit and watch baby. And I still babysat because those books were like, babysitting's cool. So, when I started thinking about writing the Shred Girls, I was like, well, what if I could make girls read Shred Girls the same way I read the Babysitter's Club, and read this book and think, oh, I can be on a bike. That's cool. So I started that series. And because I'm apparently just like a jack of all trades in the cycling industry here, I've managed cyclocross teams, and now I do a fair bit of coaching as well. Actually, for the OCA, I help out with a lot of the junior development camps. My husband, Peter, and I spent the month of February over in Girona with about 20 of our young athletes from Ontario, which was just super amazing and inspiring. And the cool part was it was actually mostly girls who were over there riding, which was so cool. And actually I got some of Jenny's athletes showed up for a couple weeks of it, which was really rad getting to know them. And then my husband, Peter, is a full-time cycling coach, and he and I put on a lot of camps and clinics for all different kinds of riders of all ages and different types of cycling. So that is that's me in a nutshell. Vicki, on to you.
So I'm Vicki. I want to say thanks to the Ontario Cycling Association for inviting me onto this. I find the word inspiring a challenging word, a really big word, and a hard word to kind of live up to. But I know that I've been through some things on the bike, and you can tell just by me talking about cycling, it's a very emotional experience for me. I've always I didn't start riding a bike seriously until about 2005. And in 2007, I raced at the Masters World Cyclocross Championships where I placed 4th. And so at the ripe age of 35, I said, hey, why don't I try and make the elite national cyclocross teams? So I did. I put my head down and worked at it. And I heard a lot of things in the background, like I'm too old, or I was too fat, or I was too slow, or I wasn't too good enough, or I wasn't good enough. But for me, that made me just work harder and made me say, no, I'm going to try and do it. Let's see what I can possibly do. And in 2010, I was very fortunate to race at the Elite World Cyclocross Championships in Tabor. And that, that was a big deal, but the best experience for me in my cycling career, I guess, is the fact that I had a lot of challenges. I got really sick in 2009 with ulcerative colitis, which, was hard to race with and hard to learn how to live with, but it made me appreciate the bike even more. In 2010, I raced the World Championships. I think I was like 40th out of 43 people. And one of the best things at the end was seeing Mariana Voss, who won. And she said to me, hey, I didn't lap you. You must have had a great race. So that was, that was great for me. That was a good feeling. I went back to Belgium the following season, got incredibly ill, came really close to dying, was in the hospital for a week in Belgium. And then I went back in 2011, crashed at the Coxside World Cup and fractured a vertebrae. So that was kind of the end of my serious cyclocross racing career. And when I came home, I just focused on riding, trying to stay healthy, and teaching women how to do cyclocross. Because when I was learning to do cyclocross, there was no one to teach me. I had to learn from my husband. It's not easy to learn from your partner. And so to help other women, to show them what to do, it's super enriching for me. Last couple of years, I've had a few surgeries, had my colon removed. So if you follow me on Instagram or Twitter, you'll see a hashtag, no colon still rolling. And that's kind of me now. I'm just trying to do everything I can. I have this thing on my body, but it doesn't slow me down. It's actually giving me my life back. So now I'm just trying to do as much for other women. We have a new group called the Ottawa Women's Cycling Network, and we started a new Ottawa Women's Cycling Club. The worst time ever, 2 weeks before the COVID shut down, but we have over 300 women in our group, and we're trying to educate them about cycling, get them excited, and so that's me. I'm just, I was someone who was really lucky to find a sport and get in a community and just keep going. And I think, so that's it. I'll stop talking because I could talk forever too. So over to you, Chantal.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for introducing yourselves. For those of you who may just be joining us, I don't know if anybody had issues connecting. I sent another email out with a better connection link there to some. We just had some introductions in alphabetical order by first name of all of our panelists here. And as you can see, if you've been with us from the beginning, there are very different backgrounds here. Everybody who is on the panel is in cycling in some manner, giving back to cycling in some manner, and keeping cycling in their lives in some manner. We're also, you'll notice this panel is very different age range from a young current still athlete to older athletes, to those still pursuing cycling for fun, to those who are educating, coaching, or just trying to spread the news about cycling. And the point of this conversation today is to continue that inspiration and just to make cycling welcoming to all. I wanted to start this conversation off after the introductions. Again, we can go alphabetically just to keep things a little organized. And if you don't really have much to say, it's okay. You can always pass on. Sorry, Anne, I'm picking on you. I might go in reverse order in a little bit.
No, I'm psyched.
So I'd love to start by asking, and these questions that I'm going to present have been brought up during the survey when those people filled out their attendance. So a lot of these questions have been presented, and some of them just kind of flow nicely. And I'd love to hear from the five of you, based on your background, what made you want to pursue your career within sport? Do you have an organization, an entity that helped inspire you? I know you may have touched on it just a little bit during your introductions, but does anybody just want to expand on that? Go ahead, Anne.
Okay. So the thing that I don't usually talk about when I talk about the fact that I was an official is that prior to really being involved in cycling a lot, I did the same route that a lot of other people did, which is I was not particularly athletic as a child, and I wanted to see what I could do with my body if I really put my mind to it. So I quit my full-time job a number of years ago and worked part-time and spent that 7 years starting with triathlon to the point where I actually, it was not a good experience because I partially tore my Achilles tendon, which did not help with the running component of it. So I switched over to the cycling part because I seemed to actually be making some gains in that area. But not gains that are good enough to be, you know, Masters world champion or on the podium in whatever. But certainly took me, with really structured training, good coaches, and strength training, took me a lot further than I ever thought that I could go as myself. However, so that really captured my really love of cycling. And I can truly say that some of the best days I've spent in my life are the days I spent on my bike on some really long rides. But it was clear to me and to most people around me that, you know, when it came to even leading the Masters Women in Ontario, that was not going to be me. So I wanted to find another way to become engaged in the sport. And that's what led me to focus on being an official, because that was a way that I could develop within the sport. I mean, not as an athlete, but still develop within the sport, and get to be a part of higher and higher level competitions, interacting with coaches and officials and organizers, really up to the highest levels of the sport. And that became a real motivator for me to keep going. So I don't know if that talks about what made you want to pursue your career, but it did start with, I want to be as good as I can be. I've gone as far as I can go on the bike within my basically limited capacity, and how can I take that further? And I don't know, I mean, for people who are athletes or even as officials, if you're a competitive person, you get to the point where you start to ask yourself, how can I do more? How can I be better? How can I get to the next level? What do I have to learn? What do I have to do? You know, who do I have to connect with? And there's that driving motivation in being an official as well. I think most people, you know, when you're interacting with the person at the race or whatever, you're maybe not necessarily aware of that, but that's certainly something that's there. And that's what I found, especially with officiating, is that, you know, the higher you go, the more tests you have to pass, the more practicals you have to do, the more you have to build relationships with your peers, you know, and that was really kind of the things that kept me going. And I mean, you asked the question, Chantel, like what, you know, is there a person or entity or whatever who inspired you? And I can't say it was one person in particular, but I think many of us, you know, I mean, when I first took my very, very first Provincial C course, the person who taught it was a woman, and she was an international official. And I looked at her and I said, well, if she could do this, so can I. And I think that actually, probably without my thinking about it at the time, really made a difference, because I literally thought, well, if she can do it, why can't I do it? And I don't know if I would have had the same experience if my first contact with the sport of officiating had been a man. So I would say that, you know, it's not a person or an entity per se, but it's definitely the way I was introduced to the sport of officiating, and then the people along the way who I learned from. Excellent.
I think the interesting thing about that is that it seems to flow naturally. So maybe there wasn't one specific incident, but just one career flowed into another. Maybe there was an injury, but it led you over to this. And that seems to be an ongoing theme with a lot of us actually here in this conversation. The other neat thing is you went from obviously learning about being a commissaire to now teaching commissaires, inspiring a new generation, being that female role model, but also at the same time being the female commissaire at bike races. You're also teaching cyclists the rules. So through enforcement, but also they learn each time. So every time you have an interaction, you are also teaching the athletes. So excellent. Perfect. Haley, Do you remember the question?
I do, and I also have it pulled up on my computer just
Perfect.
in case I forget. But
and for those of you just joining us, based on your background, what made you want to pursue your career? I have that in quotes because volunteering can also be considered a career in this conversation within the sport of cycling. Go ahead, Haley.
So I think I'm actually the opposite to what a few of you guys have said, in that I was always a highly competitive and highly athletic kid. It was like my life, sports and dance and everything like that. It was just, I was so active and so competitive from a very young age. But then when I was in grade 9, so 13 or 14, I got really sick in terms of mental health. And I actually ended up with an eating disorder, which would now be categorized as orthorexia, but at the time I was diagnosed with anorexia. And I mean, going along with that eating disorder, you can imagine that there's a whole lot of issues beyond food. So I had a lot of like anxiety problems and major self-worth issues and like insomnia and just a whole host of these mental health issues that I wasn't equipped to deal with as a 13-year-old. And I was hospitalized. I spent two months in the hospital at the culmination of this illness, this really rough period. And when I was released from the hospital, that coincided with like my first bike ride pretty much ever. I hadn't been a cyclist at that point. I was a hockey player and a dancer and soccer, and I started to go on mountain bike rides with my dad. And it was like mountain biking I was terrible at it. It was so frustrating. I was always bruised and bleeding. Like, it was not an easy pursuit. And I can't say that I actually enjoyed it, but being out on my bike was the only time where I didn't feel like the world was ending. Like, my brain just shut up. And it was just the only time that I could actually just be. And looking back, I can have that perspective. I didn't really know at the time why I kept doing it, because it was so difficult. And so there wasn't a whole lot of type 1 for me. It was all like the type 2 fun of just making myself exhausted and feeling satisfied with that. But yeah, I think that's really that element of it, the fact that my bike brought me peace. That's what's driven me to pursue cycling as a career. And I'm sure that it won't always be racing, but I believe that I will always be in cycling in some capacity. So it's definitely that big element of my personal struggles with mental health and how the bike has helped me through them. But now it's kind of morphed into a purpose of how can I help other people find that same feeling, that same satisfaction through cycling. And I'd say that's the mission that drives my racing participation. It's the interactions I get to have with girls at races who are like, I can't even tell you, I'm sorry, there's really loud vehicles on the road, but I can't even tell you the number of girls I've had messages from who've asked to meet me at a race because they also are having issues with an eating disorder, or they have severe self-confidence issues. And anyway, so I guess the bike brought me a lot of peace, and it's also helping me help others find their confidence and their just like empowerment and happiness through cycling. So that's what drives me, or drives my pursuit of this as a career. And then in terms of specific entities, there were a lot of people that facilitated that along the way. Obviously, really important coaches. The OCA was huge. Like, my memories on OCA projects as a junior athlete are some of my favorite memories ever. Just so much fun. And local clubs, the university club that I raced with when I was in Kingston at Queens, and just, yeah, I've been involved in all different levels of the sport, through the very small community level all the way to the international scene. And I'd say the organizations that I've been involved with and the people that I've been involved with have been like major factors in why I'm still able to do this.
Excellent. And the neat thing about having you on this panel is we do have a lot of younger athletes who are actually observing this conversation right now. So they have either been to junior camps or will be attending junior camps, hopefully in the future, or the near future, hopefully. And you're talking about how the bike is therapy, whether it be mental or social therapy. So that's great to hear from you. Perfect. Jenny.
80. So, I mean, the interesting thing is, yeah, there's many forks in the road in life. And yet when I look back, while this was never the plan, it seems to be, have been a pretty natural progression to there. I started coaching in swimming and soccer when I was in my late teens. I really enjoyed connecting with young women specifically at that time. I look back on my sporting career and I didn't have a lot of female coaches, but I had a lot of really great coaches and a lot of really empowering men who were coaches, who were empowering for women, who both gave me opportunities to explore that part of my life and also continue to be important people in my life to date. There was a chunk of time when I was racing that I didn't really have time to be a coach, and I was very focused on what I was doing and the teams that I was a part of, and I always kind of took a little bit of a leadership role in those environments, just because I guess I'm a little bossy and I like to be in control, which will be surprising to all of you that know me. But so and I was actually, as I was finishing up my cycling career, although I didn't know I was finishing it then, in retrospect, that's what I was doing. I was training to be an accountant. And that was as I had started in school in kinesiology and transferred out after 2 years because I didn't want to be a phys ed teacher, which is hilarious to me now. Hilarious. Like, good job, Jenny. And went over into business. And so I was working at an accounting firm that was pretty flexible with what I was doing. And all that kind of ended when I crashed, and it took me kind of 2 years to recover from the concussion that I had. And through that period of time, I did a little bit of coaching here and there. And the coach who had been coaching me at that time was Denise Kelly. And she gave me some opportunities to work with some younger national team athletes. Don Moxley, who was the Ottawa area junior coach for 30 years. Same sort of thing, just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Ironically, some of the names that are there are now our national track team. So Ariane Bunham was a junior at that time with the club, Derek G, and Vince Daetre. So three of our top track riders all came out of that one program, and I got the chance to work with them when they were 17. Through that time, I did a lot of self-reflection, realized I had probably 4 really impactful coaches in my life. One was in soccer, and the other 3 were in cycling, and they were the only 3 coaches I had my entire tenure. And Denise and Dan Trew were excellent role models. Really, as I said, still very important in my life today, and can help mentor me through all the challenges that I come to. And then I had one other coach who taught me way more about coaching than I think he ever intended to. And I would say that motivation is one of the reasons why I'm in coaching today. And for me, the change of going from a coach who was very power-based, and by power-based, I don't mean like like watts. I mean like I'm in control and you are submissive to what I'm telling you to do. And going from that to a female coach made me want to, and I'm not saying that female coaches are all the same, but I wanted to be able to be the best that I could be and provide female athletes with a female perspective from a coaching space. And again, that's not to say that there aren't phenomenal male coaches out there, because there absolutely are, and I'm lucky to have so many of them in my life. But I do feel like there is a different perspective, and for everybody, there's different people that you can connect with in those coaching realms. And I wanted to get the knowledge and give that opportunity to other women to be able to work with a female coach who was equally as qualified. So that was my big motivator coming through. One of the lucky things about having a sport that is woefully low in female coaches is I did get to go to Canada Games through a Women in Coaching grant, and that's actually where I met Haley, which is kind of fun. And that's when I started working with the OCA as well, and through that have had some opportunities that I wouldn't have otherwise had, and there is a little bit of fast tracking through those opportunities because we have so few female coaches, and I acknowledge that, and I think I do know that I'm very lucky for that, and yeah, just a lot of really great people that helped get me here.
Great. And it seems like you had some role model type coaches that helped you through a really bad situation, but basically helped inspire you to continue in your coaching career. Perfect. Moving on to Molly.
All right. So sort of like everyone's path here, mine kind of weaves and winds quite a bit too. When I started thinking though about the organization or entity that inspired me to do what I'm doing, I came back to my Rutgers cycling team. So when I first started riding with them, I had no interest in anything other than just getting faster for triathlon. But what had happened that year is our collegiate conference had just changed the point structure for the cyclocross program to where men's and women's points were 50-50. So in a given weekend, your team could get 50 points like max with your men and 50 points max with your women. And it didn't matter how many women you had. If you had one and she won the race, you'd get the 50 points. It was a really weird system, but it was meant to try to promote getting more girls into collegiate cycling. They didn't have any girls on the team, and I was showing up to rides. So they were like, here's a cyclocross bike. You're going to race cyclocross now. I was like, that sounds terrible. This looks really muddy and uncomfortable. But I did it, and I fell completely in love with it. They were the most welcoming guys in the world. And granted, yes, they were welcoming because I was half their points every weekend, but they were also just really nice guys. So they got me really into cyclocross. And at the time I was actually pursuing a career in fashion journalism, which you would not be able to tell looking at me now, but I was writing for fashion magazines at the time. And of course, when my life started becoming cyclocross, it was just, okay, where can I go to write about cyclocross? So I ended up becoming a writer and editor at Cyclocross magazine, which is a really small publication. And, just kind of started going to all these races and writing about them. And sorry if you guys can hear my dog like squealing in the background. He's really mad that he's not on this call, but he is a boy dog, so therefore he's not allowed. So as I was writing for Cyclocross magazine, I was talking to more and more women at races, and, talking about women's cycling and stuff like bike shorts and all of that. And I'd be at races, and I'll talk about this more in depth tomorrow, but I would have women come up to me, literally drop their shorts and be like, do you know what's going on down here? Because they would have a saddle sore and they would have no idea who to ask. And they'd been like looking around and couldn't find any information. And I was this person who wrote about bikes for a living. So clearly I would know the answer. And I'd be like, no, see a doctor, not me. But I realized a lot of women were having those issues. So it kind of prompted me to want to write my second book, the saddle sore one, which led me to, getting to do a lot of women's talks at bike shops. And in doing that, realizing, okay, well, most women aren't getting into sport until much later in life. And that's why they don't know about bike shorts and saddle sores and all of that stuff. So how can I get younger girls into it, which, sparked the Shred Girls thing. And then kind of alongside of that, I started realizing as I was writing about these different topics in endurance sport, I really loved learning about the training process. And, I was interviewing these coaches constantly. Like I'd be, doing 30 hours of research a week on, bike skills and cycling training and endurance sport training and sports nutrition. And I realized I loved learning about it and loved talking to coaches. So that actually ended up kind of winding me like around the coaching pathway. And, then I was lucky enough to have some camps to be able to help out at, and that sort of, helped that take off. And similar to Jenny, like being in Ontario, like there were a lot of really great opportunities as a female coach who could, go to these camps at the drop of a hat and was able to. but basically I just kind of kept following my curiosity. So if I wanted to research something, I'd probably write a book about it. If I saw, that girls weren't getting into bikes, I would be trying to figure out what's the best way for me to do it. Is that going to be writing? Is it going to be coaching? With the Shred Girl series, it was, much more about writing, because I think by the time a girl knows that she wants to get bike or cycling coaching or go to a bike camp, she's already invested in riding. I want to get the girls that are sitting around, that were me and sitting around reading books and not getting out on their bikes. I want to get those girls on bikes. And yeah, I've kind of continued to follow it and do, more coaching programs. I got my yoga teacher certification a couple of years ago, so I could teach more yoga for cyclists, because I realized a lot of the cyclists we have at camps and clinics were very, very tight. So I, started doing that. And, as we suddenly found ourselves in lockdown, I was able to shift to doing some virtual yoga for the OCA. So I don't know if anyone on this call, that's watching this, got to do any of my yoga courses. They're still on the OCA YouTube, so you can do them if you want to do some yoga for cyclists. And yeah, so my career, I guess, has been very circuitous, but it's all kind of been under this one umbrella of loving cycling and wanting to get more women in the sport, kind of by any means necessary, whether it's coaching or riding.
I love how you just seem to identify that need and then you kind of roll with it. So like, people have saddle problems, let's go with this. So and we'll learn more about that tomorrow during Molly's talk about riding comfort. Lots of saddle talk. Perfect. Vicki, go ahead.
Well, I came to sport in general pretty late in my life. I didn't actually start doing anything athletic until I graduated from university. And the first sport I grabbed was hockey. So I put everything I could into hockey, 7 days a week on the ice, twice a day, until I made it onto the top team in the city. Sorry, my cat is pushing all the chessboard pieces on the floor right now, so that's what you're hearing there. And then I started doing martial arts, and I started doing taekwondo, and I decided I wanted to get my black belt. And once I got my black belt, I decided I wanted to compete at the World Taekwondo Championships. So I put all my time and effort into that, and I went to the World Taekwondo Championships, and I got a bronze medal in heavyweight sparring, and my specialty was breaking boards. I used to hit boards with my hand and with my feet, and then I used to go in the ring and punch people. And then after doing that for a while, then I got into cycling, and cycling was really where I found my groove. And I never intended to have a, career, but once I decided I wanted to be an elite cyclist, I actually quit my job. I was working as a tech writer. I quit my job and just went for it. I was super lucky to get some personal sponsors, and so I could, afford to live in Belgium for 4 seasons and race. And, I was really lucky. And now I want to try and give that back. I was really fortunate. I want to help other women, learn how to do cyclocross, how to be comfortable on their bike, how to do a remount, how to do a dismount, not to be afraid to go down a hill, or, just to feel comfortable. And we're really lucky here in Ottawa to have an amazing cyclocross scene. With some weekends, we have like 75 women who come out to race, and some of those women, all they do is one cyclocross race a week. And at the end of the race, you see people hugging each other and high-fiving, and it's just fantastic. And I love getting questions and emails. And then from the, illness side, I get a lot of emails from people, questions from people who are athletes who have ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. And I know what it's like to be a sick person who's trying to get the most out of their body at the same time. And I had to learn the hard way what not to do and what would work, and learn how to take a rest and to say, no, I can't do this today. So now I try and help other people. Anytime someone emails me, messages me on Instagram, what have you, I have all the time in the world for that, because it's hard to want to get the most out of your body but not be able to, whether that's the physical aspect or the mental aspect, or just not even having the resources to ask someone a question, about saddle sores, or how to remount, or I want to go learn how to ride on the track. Like there's a lot of information out there, but there's not a lot of information out there. So I think that the more we can just give more information to people, the better it can be. So I think I kind of answered it. I'm not really sure. Yeah. Okay, I'm done.
So Vicki, we have you on the panel because you kind of bring another dimension to this conversation, because when we talk about a career, your career currently is more voluntary, inspiring and leading clubs, and I would say you're probably not making much financial income from your career currently within cycling, but it's
No, definitely not. Jen and I, with the Ottawa Women's Cycling Network and the Ottawa Women's Cycling Club and all the cross clinics I do them all for free. I don't want anybody to give me any money. And if there's some, because you just need to give back, right? To help other people.
Exactly. And that's kind of the ongoing theme of the conversation that we're having here, just giving back, even just giving back our time in this panel discussion here. And I'm hoping that the attendees that we have here, and perhaps those who are watching this on video a little later on, can kind of get some inspiration from hearing all these different versions of cycling as a lifestyle. And again, kind of the ongoing theme of the conversation is you don't necessarily have to be a pro athlete to have a career in cycling. And we have somebody from almost like every aspect within this conversation. We have an athlete, we have ex-athletes, we have a volunteer, we have coaches, commissaires, teachers, those who continue to inspire young athletes, those who continue to inspire other coaches, and just leaders in general within the cycling world. The neat thing through the introductions, we kind of covered one of the next questions that I had. The next question I did have was talking about roadblocks that we've encountered on the way. And actually, I think everybody here has encountered some sort of roadblock that actually helped them kind of divert their path or move them towards cycling or towards a different aspect, whether it be coaching or spreading the news. But I'd like to focus a little more on, because this is Women's Cycling Week, I was wondering, and I don't know if we'll go alphabetically or if somebody just wants to kind of speak out on it. Has anybody in this group here personally experienced roadblocks directly relating to being a woman in a predominantly male sport?
Am I A?
You're A. You can go ahead first if you have an answer.
Okay, I can go because it's fairly short. So I'm going to talk about this specifically from the point of view of being an official. So, and I'm going to look at it from that perspective. And I'm going to say, what I will say is that at the provincial level and at the national level in Canada, the answer to roadblocks related to being a woman and being an official, the answer is no. And that's because there are very strong, because there have been a number of very strong female officials in Canada. And so I think they set the tone for what people expected. So there was not, I did not encounter, I don't feel that I encountered any roadblocks as being an official in Canada. And working with Americans, it's sort of the same thing. There are also some very strong women officials, international officials in the US, and because North America there is at least the concept of, there ought to be gender equity, even if there isn't, or, that kind of thing. Within North America, I'm going to say it's not, I have not experienced it. Where you start to see it a little bit more is when you work with officials outside of North America. And then it is, I will say, a whole new world. And so whether I encounter people for me, because I just work within the country, I would be encountering people who come here. There is definitely a non-North American perception of the quality and the competence and the ability of women within the sport. Not from everybody, but you do have to make sure that you're demonstrating just how competent you really are. And for anybody who wonders about, for any woman who wants to go on to be an international official, you simply need to look at the number of women who are kind of like world tour officials. I don't even know if there's one this year, like there's a group of people who work all the same events. The number of women who are, if you look at the track World Cups, how many women have been president of a track World Cup? Maybe we had one last year. They're starting to branch into that a little bit. Check back over the last 5 years to see how many female judge referees there have been in the international and World Cup event. So once you leave the North American scene, it is my perception that there are significant challenges for women to advance in officiating. And really, you just look at the assignments. You can go onto the UCI site, and they'll show you who the main panel members are for the different events, and just go through and try to count the number of women, and you'll be digging away in there for quite a long time. So so personally, within my sphere, generally no, but I know that for women who want to go all the way to international, they're going to face some challenges.
I will say the one thing I have noticed in terms of officiating, I am also a commissaire, and I would say about 6 years ago, there were 3 female commissaires in Ontario, and myself, and I think I could only think of maybe one other, but as we have continuing graduating classes of commissaires in different disciplines, we are definitely seeing it almost come to a 50-50 in terms of gender when it comes to classes. Like I would say our last couple of track commissaire courses we had, it was almost 50-50 with males and females coming through as commissaires. So that's pleasant to see.
Yeah.
Perfect. Anybody else?
I have some thoughts on this. There's definitely, mountain bike is a pretty equal discipline as far as prize money and race coverage and such goes, but there's obviously still inequalities. But I guess what I want to say is that a roadblock is maybe the wrong word, because I feel very strongly that you can't let someone else's attitudes or someone else's prejudices or whatever they may be a deciding factor in how you carry out your life. So I wouldn't say that I've ever encountered a roadblock because of my gender. I have encountered challenges that have had to be overcome. But I think the fact that you are a woman in the sport of cycling is a way to, right there, you're shattering the ceiling right now. So I think it's really inspiring to see women in cycling, and that's one of the things that I'm very passionate about this. That's one of the things that fires me up. And I think that just the very act of you getting on a bicycle and being outside and, riding alone or holding your own in a group of guys, either way, right there, you're affecting change by doing that. Yeah, that's just a thought I had, but.
That's a really good thought, actually. I like that thought process. Molly, how about you?
Sorry, I double muted myself there. Yeah, it's interesting in a lot of ways. I think for my career, and I know this isn't going to be true for everyone, but I would actually say being a woman has really only helped me in cycling. When I started writing for Bicycling magazine, it was at a time where the editor-in-chief wanted more female voices because he realized that they were missing. So when I was there, 90% of the staff was female. That's how serious he took that. I think, in coaching, there were a lot of great opportunities for having more female coaches. And, like I said in the last question, the reason I even got to get started in cycling was because the female points got raised. So my team happened to need a girl who could actually race. So I think the biggest roadblock that I really see in cycling, I guess, is the roadblock that happens when you're 8 to 10 years old. And there aren't that many girls riding. The girls I knew, everyone learned how to ride a bike when they were, 4, 5, 6 years old. But then around 8 to 10 years old, I think it's 87% of girls stop riding. The bikes go in the garage and there they sit. So to me, the biggest roadblock comes at that young age when girls stop seeing other girls riding and stop thinking that bikes are for them. So I guess that would probably be the biggest roadblock that I ever faced, would be hitting a point where I just didn't know that girls could ride bikes or that bike racing existed for girls. I legitimately thought the Tour de France was the only bike race in the world. If you were going to be a bike racer, you did the Tour. That was it. And only boys did that. So yeah, to me, it's that roadblock at that young age.
Excellent. Very good. Jenny, have you experienced any roadblocks when it comes to coaching? You actually said being female kind of helped accelerate your development.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've given this one a lot of thought because I think there's the yin and the yang in that in Canada, and I think actually, Anne, you proposed it or poised cycling perfectly in that in Canada there are a lot of opportunities. When you look a little bit farther, cycling cycling in Europe is still a man's world. To give you a little bit of perspective on this, in 2018, I went to Junior Track Worlds as the head coach. And I came down and so I had with me, I had a female soigneur, another male coach, and a male mechanic. And I came down from being trackside during warm up, and my assistant coach was really flustered. What's going on? Well, this woman just came up to me, and I like was flustered enough that I ended up talking to the mechanic, and the mechanic's like, oh yeah, the woman who is the head of the UCI came down and went, who's your head coach? The mechanic's like, oh, she's up over there. Yeah, no, who's your head coach? She's right over there. No, I mean your men's head coach. And they said, no, she's right up there. And then she walked over to my assistant coach and reamed my assistant coach out for something that had happened with one of the male athletes. So to me, just kind of showing that like there's no way she's in charge, sort of thing. And there aren't a ton of really obvious stories like that. So in some ways, I like to tell that one. I did not enjoy being in that one. There's many other versions of that, and when I think about it, that a lot of them come from being in Europe. I was at a race this fall where I had there was an elite men's team, an elite women's team, and a junior men's team. And the elite men were the only team that crashed twice in the event. The junior men, I don't think they actually crashed, but they certainly made life exciting. And our women didn't crash at all. And at one point I had one of the officials come over to me and say, you really need to tell those girls they're not racing well enough, and we're gonna have to get them out of there. They're the only ones who haven't caused a crash. Like, how are you picking on the women? I don't even understand. And I had to calm myself down and go and talk and ask the other guy. And he was like, and luckily actually Andrew was there. He was like, I don't know, Jenny, I can't help you. And then I had a male commissaire tell me once that I should smile more. And that was lovely. Again, over in Europe, those kind of, but that having been said, go back to world-class racing on the infield at a track World Cup. I can name the other 3 women that you will ever see trackside as a female coach, and they're all development coaches. There were no women tracks, or that's not true. There were a couple women trackside at the World Championships this year. We're really lucky to have a great history of female coaches in Canada. And I think that's where that dichotomy comes from. Tanya Dubnikoff in 2012 was, I believe Guido told me, the only female coach to ever coach athletes in track to an Olympic medal. So we do have some pretty amazing leadership in that regard, but it is a bit of a struggle, and it is something that I'm very aware of every day I go to work. And we're very lucky to have really great people at Cycling Canada, but I can tell you there have been times in my work life where I have lost a lot of confidence from really subtle undercut comments routinely, very little tolerance for being a mom at that level. I was really lucky when I had my second daughter through the OCA. Elodie spent the first 4 months of her life trackside at junior camps, and it was a lot of fun, and nobody had any problems with it. And in fact, a lot of my kids grew up around the Cyclery team and doing some of the Ontario stuff, and everybody seemed to love having the kids around. And the second I stepped into at the national team level, there was a lot of criticism of me wanting my kids, and I had to have a pretty serious discussion with the people who hired me that if I was going to be away from home at any point before I finished nursing my daughter was coming with me. And if I was ever away for more than 10 days, I wanted the option to take my kids with me. And let me be clear, I didn't want them to pay for that. I just wanted them to know that that's what was going to happen. And I didn't hear from them for 10 days. And I'm pretty sure they went and they consulted legal, and I got told when I came back that they would give me a pumping room. This and that, the other. And I was like, that's great. I don't really care. That's not what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is you to support me in being a mom and also having my gym career. And probably worth noting that, as with all these things, this job didn't come up at a perfect time in my life. My daughter was 8 months old when they advertised the job, but it was my dream job, and my husband and I spent some time, and I was like, no, you know what, we're going to go for it. So there were some challenges, and despite making that really clear at the get-go, she came with me to Pan Am Champs that year. And then when I was supposed to go to a World Cup, the same problem came up. Well, what do you mean? I said, listen, we talked about this before I took this job, that she was coming with me. And in the end, it all sorted itself out. But it's the little fights every day for those that can get a little exhausting. And then things like I'd been told at different times that my kids couldn't be in the DTE, and yet I know that I've seen other kids that there's no problems because it's dad, and dad's a good dad if my kids are at work, and mom just doesn't have her shit together if her kids are at work. So there's a bunch of those double standards that I think everyone's getting used to me now, which and we've had some good turnover of staff, which has been really good for me. But yeah, there's definitely been some challenges, and I think especially when you look to the old school European folk, it's really hard for them to get used to a woman being able to come in and know what's going on. And I do think, yeah, in Canada we're so lucky, and every time when you're talking, I love Louise, and as somebody who has had a massive influence on my life, I think it's pretty cool that I've only ever really known her as an official, but I think she is an inspiring person, just period, because I remember the first time I met her when I was 17 years old, and it still brings a smile to my face when I think about her and when I like to spend time with her. So yeah, I think everybody here has that same kind of message, that in being here, Haley, you said it great, you are inspiring, and it is sometimes all you need to do is look across the room and see that you're not the only person having that fight, and it makes it a little bit easier. And yeah, we're lucky to be in Canada and to have that. So
sorry. I was really hoping that you would tell that story about at the Junior Worlds, because you've told that to me before, and I was like, oh, this would be perfect. I've had also similar experiences with my coaching trackside when I took over the head coach position after a renowned cyclist previously had that role and moved on to coaching in Europe. And I remember getting in an argument with somebody trackside. They were misbehaving, and I said, you can't do that. And they said, well, so-and-so said I could, the previous coach. And I said, well, guess what? I'm so-and-so now. They just, kind of, oh, okay. So it's hard to get that dominant. You got to kind of assert yourself sometimes to make your point come across. And I do love that you bring to the table being a parent, being a mom while coaching or pursuing a career within cycling, and having to gain and maintain that respect of either your coworkers, the organization, or, even race organizers when it comes to having your kids there. You're right. There's a bit of a double standard. And I think in Canada, we're coming along nicely so far. Let's go to Vicki to see, have you experienced anything of that sort?
I mean, I guess for me, the reason why I'm quite passionate about helping other women with cyclocross, and the reason why Jen and I started the new club and the group, was because we found that, especially with cyclocross, a lot of women are coming into cross later in life, in their 30s or 40s. So, and a lot of times they're learning from their husband or their boyfriend, or there was someone in their club who said you should do cross. And well, most cycling clubs are geared towards men, and there's no female role models helping out other people. So with the cross clinics, it's really, I have women coming to my clinics, well, I tried and I just can't. I watched this video, or my boyfriend told me to do this. And just being able to have, I think for the way I do is to say, look, I started like you. I couldn't do it either. Everybody has to learn. This is how we're going to learn. I'm going to help you. And then with the cycling clubs that we started, our goal with that was because we wanted to give something that's just for women. You know, we wanted a club just for women. We didn't want a club where, you know, I'm joining this club because my boyfriend's in it, or there's a guy at work I know who's in it. So now they're going to give me this jersey and this kit that doesn't really fit that great, and I'm not going to have anybody to ride with. So our goal with the Ottawa Women's Cycling Club and the network is to bring women together, and we want to give with the club, once we can actually do club activities, is make it like all the benefits of a women's team without the team pressure. So we're going to do training rides, and we're going to have camps, and we're going to do all sorts of things to get women of all abilities riding and supporting one another. And we're seeing that now, you know, virtually through the Facebook group. People ask questions. We've had Zoom calls about nutrition or fixing a flat, or where do you ride? Because a lot of women, they don't know where to ride, or they're not comfortable riding alone. So we've learned that if we share Strava files, then they realize, oh, this is a route that someone did, it's 50K, or here's a 100K route, you could stop here, and this, but you know, it helps build confidence. Knowledge builds confidence, and the more knowledge we can give women, the better. And I think that will just start turning over. Then someone will say, oh, I started riding this year, you should start riding and come ride with me. You know, it just keeps everything going. And hopefully, I mean, I see in the local cross scene, we have no young women. The most of the women are 35 plus. We have some, you know, young girls, but we don't have that 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old. I don't know where they go. I don't know what happened to them when they're coming to the cross races with their parents, and then then they're gone. So, you know, the next challenge is to figure out how to bridge that gap, because I know there's a lot of girls out there who can ride bikes fast because they were beating me when they were 14. Now, like, where did they go, right? I want to get that back. So yeah, I mean, you know, my only roadblock was trying to learn things myself. And I think that's just given me the impetus to give back to other people, so they don't have to go through that struggle town themselves or feel like they can't do it, right? Because that's it.
I think you're right in that finding that network or that connection is really important. I, like Jenny, came from a background of swimming when I was a teenager, and cycling was kind of my like summer sport. And my close swimmer girls that I have known since grade 9 are still my best friends, and, you know, we're the bridesmaids at each other's weddings. And, but having that bond kept me in the sport longer than I think I would have if I had not made that companionship. In fact, I had switched clubs previous to sticking to the final club I was in, because I just didn't connect with anybody there. They didn't have the same mindset as me. So finding that like group of women is super important, whether it be for our junior riders or even our master ladies. I have a Facebook chat group with just a bunch of like master ladies from my cycling club, and actually other cycling clubs, mostly track riders. And we just like message each other and check in on each other and like send funny pictures and how's it going, checking in. I think that's really important to keep the interest in the sport. Very good. All right. So we talked about roadblocks, and I like what Haley said about maybe it wasn't necessarily a roadblock, but it was an obstacle and we worked our way around it. In fact, a lot of our roadblocks or obstacles helped us grow personally and expand or move to a different branch within cycling or discover something about ourselves or the needs within the sport. I do like that Anne and Jenny spoke a lot about how we're very lucky here in Canada with how our culture is developing into being female friendly, promoting female coaches, athletes, commissaires, just generally females in sport. I love Molly's take on the fact that they offered equal points. There's arguments to this day about prize money at races, the arguments for equal prize money, but there's only 25% women showing up. Why should it be equal prize money? So it's an ongoing debate. Has anybody else, or would Jenny and Anne like to add to their experiences in other countries? Has anybody else experienced either positives, better than Canada, or negatives in other countries regarding being a female or gender equality within our sport?
I don't have anything else to add, so if Jenny does, you can go first.
I think this conversation would be incomplete if we didn't mention Rachel Heel. Rachel Heel is a director who's from, she's originally from England, and she's directed in all over the States for what was Optum to UHC, and is now with Tibco, I believe. But I believe she is the only female director to ever have directed a pro continental men's team race. And so I do think it's starting to get there. Again, you look at what are some of the opportunities out there I don't know if they're still doing it, but for a while they were giving scholarships to do the director sportif course in Switzerland for female directors, because they needed more female directors. We are definitely turning a page even internationally in terms of bringing more women and having more women stick around in the sport. And I think that's part of it. Is whatever it is, we lose a lot of women through the life cycle of cycling. And I think that's what's really, really inspiring about everybody on this call, yourself included, Chantal. I think it must be noted that you wear so many hats in the cycling community, and to bring up inspirational women in cycling in Ontario and not mention Chantal would be a very, very unfair thing to do. So to me, that cycling is a big part of everybody's life, and that's here, and hopefully that's on the call as well, and that however you can stay involved. Men do it a lot. Like, it seems to be more natural for men to stay involved, and I get it to a certain degree, because you can keep riding and you can be a man who's moderately in shape and still be able to like just kill it out there. I mean, one of the real benefits of COVID is I've started riding my bike again, but I'm very slow. It's very hard. So but yeah, I think there are a lot of international opportunities. I was supposed to actually go on a women in coaching scholarship grant to the Commonwealth Games. That was an international women's thing. So they were trying to bring women coaches through all other sports and do some personal stuff. I wasn't able to go, but there are those opportunities out there. And so if it's something that you want to do, there are some benefits. I think the other thing that I wanted to mention is the one thing that I really want to make clear through all this is I want to be the best that I can be, and I want to be the best coach that I can be. And I don't want to be the best women's coach. I want to be the best coach. And for me, one of the, if you're going to look at structural things that are interesting in the history of Cycling Canada, I am the first female coach they have had that women is not in my title. So I am now the next gen coach on the track. I was hired as the women's coach. And if you look at Tanya or Denise, they were both the women's road coach and the women's track coach. So for me, that's a big win. And you have to put a little bit of context on that. But I got a little bit of pushback initially when I said that I could coach the men as well. And having Laura Brown be able to be trackside with the next gen men's team at Milton was really, really cool. So we have great people in our organization in Canada, and I mean you can walk down the negative experiences all you want, but I think what we have to highlight is they are those things that make you stronger, and it makes you aware, and I have to be really careful not to view a bunch of interactions that I have through that lens, because I think I've had enough negative experiences that I'll get my back up really easily. So I have to watch that. But we are pretty lucky. So, yeah.
Excellent. Vicki, you were saying something there, I think.
I was going to say that, when I started racing cross in Belgium, which was in 2007, it was an interesting time for, I think, women's bike racing, women's cyclocross especially. We are getting more elite women's races. We could race with the junior boys if we wanted. If there wasn't a women's race, they let us race with the masters men. I mean, the racing opportunities were huge. And through the whole time, we had a few women who were quite outspoken: Helen Wyman, Katarina Nash, Georgia Gould here in North America, who really started pushing the bar for women, getting, making the move for equal prize money, moving the start times for elite women's races from like 9 o'clock in the morning till 1 o'clock in the afternoon, letting us park in the elite parking lots. At the beginning, we couldn't park in the elite lot, even though, I was an elite rider. I couldn't park there. I was able to often sneak my way in because I had a really good mechanic who was the mechanic for a Pro Tour men's team. So he would get me in. But it was like, we don't need it. It was an evolution, but the thing was, people were always excited to see women racing. That was my experience in Belgium, in France, Italy, everywhere where I raced my cross bike. People were excited to see women racing. And once they realized there was a women's race, people were coming and they were attending. And I think the spectators, they wanted it. The sponsors were getting more on board because they saw that they were spectators. It's just the long arm of organization and bureaucracy is sometimes slow to change their mind a little bit, right? And to see what's happening. And now I just see what's happening in cycling, in women's sport in general. It's really starting. I mean, it's an exciting time, I think, to be someone like Haley, to be racing, because there's so much more happening, right? And you have more female role models, everything. So I wouldn't say that I had, I just think that everything's sort of catching up. So yeah, that's it. That's all I have to say.
Slowly but surely.
Slowly but surely, yeah.
Haley or Molly, anything to add to that?
I would say in Europe, thinking about racing, being in like the journalist scrum in Europe is very different than the US, because you're pretty much the only female in a sea of giant male photographers, or at least you were until like a couple years ago. And the number of times I've gotten like elbowed or like shoved out of the way, and I realized that like the saying goes, you're supposed to go high when they go low, but I quickly realized I'm really short, so I could go low while they were going high, and kind of figured out how to work my way around it. But yeah, and I mean, honestly, the same applied when I was a team manager, being, on the start line to get the riders stuff and like get them ready for the races, or meeting them after the races to, get them ready for the podium and stuff. When it was the men's race, all of the other managers kind of looked at me like I had two heads and were just really confused why like a young woman was like the one showing up to the managers meeting and like signing for stuff and, kind of being in charge that way. So yeah, definitely over in Europe, it's still very different. And I mean, like Vicki was saying about the cyclocross scene with the parking lots, I would say even now in 2018, 2019, the elite women, like now they're allowed in the big parking lot, yes, for sure. But if you look at like the setups that the male teams have compared to what like the solo female riders have, you really can see the discrepancy in like sponsor dollars and team dollars that are going towards the women's teams versus the men's teams, and the junior boys teams versus the junior girls. So yeah, as soon as you hit Europe, you're like, oh yeah, there is still a lot of gender inequality in sport. Yeah.
Kind of sad sometimes when you do see that, but it's coming along.
It is, for
Bit
sure.
of an eye-opener, yeah. Haley, anything?
Yeah, I have to speak quickly because my dad just fired up the lawn tractor, so I have to get this out while you can hear me. I think there's lots of little things like you guys have already big things like you guys have already touched on that that are like that just repeatedly happen. But one of the things that hasn't been mentioned is how the media portrays us and how the fans interact with us, and I find that very different in Europe. There's a lot the words that people use when I'm over there they're different. There's a lot more comments about appearance, and one thing that really bugs me, it probably doesn't bug anybody else, but we're always referred to as the ladies, not the women. And it's like, I don't know why, but like little things like that and how we're kind of interacted with on a more of a personal level or with the commentary is different. And I think it's just a good reminder that you are in charge of your image, and you're in charge of how you're not in charge of how you're perceived, but you're in charge of what you put out there. And as a young junior woman, I don't know if I had the maturity and the wherewithal to create the image that I wanted to create for myself. And now that I'm a little bit older, I'm just more aware of it, and I'm more aware of what I put out on social media and that kind of stuff, so that I am in control of my perception as best as I can be. But yeah, that's a big one for me that I notice a lot. Even like the shots they'll use on Red Bull, for example, and like the pre-race stuff, there's a lot of the women they capture and how they show them in the pre-race hype videos are very different than how they're showed in the men are showed. So little things like that, I guess. But
I love that you aren't afraid to question that. I think that is important, especially if we want to see change happening. I know this is several years ago, there was a video of like an interviewer talking to, I think it was like Serena Williams, and they asked her like what she was wearing, and she's like, but you just asked that like that male tennis player like a question about the game, like a manly question, and you just asked me what I'm wearing. Like, who cares what I'm wearing? I'm playing a game, I'm playing a sport, and I just won. So it's good to question that and be in control of how you're portrayed as much as you possibly can, and promote, you know, equality when it comes to wording and messaging and pictures and promotion of the sport. Excellent. Now I'm hoping to keep this around an hour and a half, because I know our attention spans might be slowly trickling away. So I just kind of wanted to wrap things up here just by asking each of our panelists, and we can go again in alphabetical order. Sorry, Anne, thank you. I just kind of want to, I had two questions near the end, but I'm going to tie them both together because I think they are very related. The first question I had was, and you can choose to answer both or smush them into one. It's if you could have a pep talk with the you from 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. You can choose. Haley might not be as many years ago as Vicki, for instance, or Anne.
Not old.
And if you could have a pep talk with the you from however many years ago, what advice would you give? And kind of tied in with that, do you have any advice from your experiences that you want to share with others on this call, or perhaps watching this recording at a later date?
I will try. I'll try to keep this brief. So, in answer to the first question that you put out there, like what, let's say 10 years ago, for example, I would say I'm going to just talk about the curse of perfectionism, and I'm going to say that if I had to talk to myself, let's say 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I would say just don't take things so seriously. Like, in the effort to be the best you could be and do everything better and more, to be better all the time, you can fall into the trap of being perfect. And there's that time when you make mistakes and you just have to move on. You have to learn from your mistakes. You have to celebrate your successes. And so I would say, don't take things so seriously. So that would be my comment there. And then the other one about advice from experiences that I'd like to share with other people, I would really say, being an official is pretty fun. I mean, there are a lot of things that are kind of cool. Like at the races, at coaches and athletes, they just see you there, with your face on doing whatever. But in fact, you get to work with the organizer, you get to put together your team of officials, you get to coach them, you get to think about who's going to be in the best spot. You have to think about, okay, like there was a crash in quarter 1 with 5 laps to go. Are we going to stop the race, or are we going to keep it going? What are you going to do? And so there's my advice and my experience would be to say to people, don't be afraid to explore officiating, because it actually has a lot of fun components to it.
I agree. And I enjoy the camaraderie between the officials outside of the competition as well.
Yeah.
Excellent.
We all drink beer together after.
Yeah, we drink beer together and after. Haley, go ahead.
I would tell myself to dream big and dream earlier. Like I never believed that the Olympics were a possibility for me until I got an email that I was on the long list, and I had never really considered that might happen. And I think that if I had just shed my own personal limitations earlier and had the courage to say, had the courage to actually believe in my daydreams, then I just believe in yourself, I guess, and have the courage to chase the things that you dream about.
Excellent. Thank you, Haley. Jenny.
Yeah, I think the biggest part and the most we can do in life is to really spend a little time to know what your values are and stick to those values, and the more you can be true to yourself, you're not going to regret those decisions that come out of that. And it doesn't mean that it's always going to be easy, but you're not going to regret it. And I think cycling is a pretty amazing sport. It's freedom, it's a mode of transportation, it's so many great things, and I'd love to have more people stick around and share that with other people. And so if there's a way that you can give back some of the awesomeness that your bike has given you, and I think the really cool thing about this panel is there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. And I mean, just talk to Molly. she'll find an answer for how you can give back in that. But I think we do have some pretty amazing things. And then as women, we need to be our best allies, and lift each other up, and really we're getting there. It's not the 80s anymore, but cycling can sometimes go back there. And so I think we can support each other and really just come and be the best that we can be and enjoy the process.
Enjoy the process. Thank you, Jenny. Molly.
All right. I think it's sort of echoing the last few sentiments, and it's really just that the advice I would give myself and give to other people would just be to, actually follow your passions and follow your curiosity, and it's gonna work out. And it might not, be the exact career that you thought it would be. If you're looking to pursue a career in cycling, you might not make it as a pro, or you might realize that coaching or officiating or race directing or writing or any one of these careers is like the one for you, or being a mechanic on the pro tour, or any of these things. And it might not be the exact career that your parents maybe expected you to have, or that you can explain really easily at dinner parties. But it's a really awesome life when every day is pretty much directed by this thing that really lights you up and gets you so freaking excited. So yeah, that would be mine.
Excellent. I can speak from experience there. When people ask me what I do, I kind of summarize it by saying I work a series of part-time jobs and kind of full-time jobs within the sport of cycling.
I'm stealing that.
Yeah,
I like
series
that.
of part-time jobs. It's great. And to a non-cyclist, they're like, oh, okay, yeah. And to a cyclist, they're like, well, what do you mean? And you can go into it more. Excellent. And last but certainly not least, Vicki.
I think I probably would have said the same thing that most people are saying now. I think if I was to look back, 10 years ago, and what advice I would give myself, 10 years ago, I raced at the World Championships, and the day before that race, someone posted on my blog that I wasn't good enough and I shouldn't be there. And I almost didn't do that race. So I think it's important for you to just believe in yourself and believe in what you can do. And there's really no limits on what you can do. If you want to do something, just do it. And if someone says you can't, you just say, I can and I will, right? That we have great examples here. We have so many, pioneers right here on this panel, right? Who have said I'm going to do it. It doesn't matter what no one's done it before me. I'm going to be the first. And all we need is a first to get a second, a third, a fourth. And then we have the ball rolling and we have momentum. So that would be my advice to myself 10 years ago. And I'm frankly, 10 years later today, it's still the same advice that I have. I have to remind myself, yeah, you can do things. If you want to do something, do it. Age doesn't matter. Your sex doesn't matter. Your experience doesn't matter. If you want to do it, just do it. So yeah, I think that's all I'm going to say. Yeah, I think my emotion probably speaks more than my words at this point. So
Absolutely. And I wouldn't be lying if I didn't get a little teary-eyed during that. So thank you so much for that.
Sorry. You can tell how, the bike is like,
I'm the host. I can't cry.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say a big thank you to all of our panelists here. Anne, Haley, Jenny, Molly, Vicki, thank you so much for, making yourself available to take this call. Thank you to everybody who's attending and potentially people who are tuning in at a later date. I'm hoping that people have taken some of this advice that we just heard as our last question there from any of our panelists, and just do what you love. So if it's cycling that you love, pursue it, and something might just come out of it. And even if it's not necessarily a paying career, it can be what you do in your off time, what keeps you sane, what helps inspire you, your friendships, your lifestyle, maybe even your partners. I know actually, I think most of the panelists here are cohabitating with a fellow cyclist and or somebody who is passionate about cycling. So just keep doing what you love, because it'll just guide you in your life. And if anybody has any questions about this panel conversation, feel free to email me from the email that you received today, events.team@ontariocycling.org. Tomorrow, we're going to see Molly again for a talk about getting comfortable on the bike. On Thursday, we are going to be talking about inclusion and diversity within the sport of cycling. And believe it or not, I actually had a hard time formulating those two panels, because people from this panel suit on that panel, and people from that panel could have come onto this panel. So you're going to see some more inspiring ladies on Thursday's panel as well. If you want to check the calendar for what else is coming up this week, all the way up to Sunday's Zoom final call, it's all on our website, ontariocycling.org. And I just want to say a final thank you for everybody here for joining us on Ontario Women's Cycling Week.
Thanks for organizing, Chantel.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for organizing,
you.
Chantel.
Yes, thank you.
Well, nice to see you again, Jenny. I haven't seen you in a long time, and Haley, I feel like I saw you when you're probably like this tall. So yeah, and yeah, and
And
Molly, I've seen you at races too. So yeah, it's been kind of cool to just
thank you to everybody that was here. I certainly feel inspired as I go away. So thank you. And thank you, Chantel, again.
Yeah,
I
thank you,
think
Chantel.
you're a pretty inspiring woman yourself. So
Well, I'll just alter my job title, 6 job titles later.
there you go.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. And I'm going to say good night for now, and have a good rest of the week. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.